Welcome to Gentle Yoga. It's a morning yoga class, which at my house it's a morning yoga class. You might be doing it a different time at your house if you're doing the recording later. But for me, like, morning is just a time to sort of gently come back home to the body, a chance to move all the different parts of the body that can tend to get a little stiffer, tighter while we're sleeping, or maybe a little, like I sleep on my side kind of curled up, and so working with the shoulders and the neck and that sort of thing to sort of open and make space in all those places in a really gentle way. That's the notion that we're working with for Gentle Yoga class for now, for the morning. We're going to need a couple yoga props. So if you have a yoga strap, this is a yoga strap, and it is pretty long, and it has a buckle on one end that lets me make a loop. But this is kind of fancy, and not everybody has that just laying around the house. But what you may have is like a scarf or a dish towel, or even a regular towel would work. Anything like that that kind of will extend the length of your arm. Now, a dog leash that has a loop for your hand might actually work really well as well, and would give you the little loop to put your foot in. So if you have something like that handy, you can grab that. And if you want to invest in some yoga props, because we're probably going to be doing yoga at home a lot over the next year or so, you can, investing in a yoga strap, a yoga block, and a blanket is a great way to get started. And then you can gather some things around your house, like some throw pillows or couch cushions, or even pillows from your bed, and stack a few of them up, or even wrap them in another blanket. So if you have multiple blankets at your house, you can grab a couple blankets. They work great in all kinds of different ways. You can fold them or roll them or whatever. Yoga straps, again, you don't have to have one, but they're really nice. And then a yoga block might come in handy later as well. So we're going to start lying down, and you can use a blanket to do this. I'm going to use this pillow. So the way that you would use a blanket is you would take the blanket and either make sure that it's long enough to cover at least most of your spine and your head. So for me, that's plenty of space. It gets down to my waist and up to my head. So that's enough. I would fold it to that length, and then you can just kind of fold it over itself a few times so that you get like a long little pillow. This is about what you would get if you bought a pranayama bolster, which is something that's about that size. And those are used to open up the chest and create a little space for breathing. So that's essentially what we're going to do. Hang on just a second. I haven't seen this one yet today. I'm going to check on her and just make sure she's okay. Oh, she was a sleepyhead. You a sleepyhead? You okay? Yeah. You okay there, kid? You look okay. Yeah, you look all right. All right, we're good. Check everybody that lives here every day, just make sure everybody looks okay. And if I haven't seen one for a while, check it. So I'm going to lie down over this pillow. Okay, so if you're using a blanket, you can have the blanket much further down your back without too much discomfort. Now you'll decide based on how your spine feels if any of this is appropriate. It might be better for you to have a wider surface that doesn't create this little shoulder opener and just elevates you. For me, what I'm after is this kind of feeling of the arms opening up and a little bit of the shoulder sort of dropping back. So that's what I'm going to do for today. I'm also going to use this blanket as a second prop here. I can grab the end of it. Okay. I'm going to take my legs, so just put them in this little butterfly position so the feet are together and the knees are open, with the blanket underneath my hips, or under the top of my thigh. It's not too spicy. So if it's too spicy, you feel a lot of stretch in your inner thigh, just throw in a yoga block under each knee, or a pillow under each knee, or throw a blanket in under the whole stack. If you're using something that's a little more firm, have that object like this pillow a little higher up your back. Like if you're using a throw pillow, you might want it to just kind of go to very much right about the bottom of the shoulder blade. If you're using a smaller object like a blanket, you can go down a little farther. Now you can take your arms out wide. You can even take them over your head if that's comfortable. For me, the best position is just to kind of let them fall about where they would normally hang out if I were in mountain pose, and then to let the shoulder blades kind of relax in toward each other, and this open part of the shoulder, the front shoulder, to relax back. Let the arm bone drop back into the socket a bit. We'll take some nice deep breaths. This is a great way to, one, access a deeper breath, especially if we spent the night curled up. And it's also a good way to sort of correct posture if we are spending a lot of time over a computer, over the sewing machine, driving, anything where the arms are brought forward. Some people like hairdressers, this would be great for them. Because the arms tend to kind of come forward, these muscles tighten up, and they don't give us as much access to the deep breath. So our secondary breathing muscles are these little muscles in between the ribs, and then these little pec muscles, pec minor, that attaches the rib cage through the armpit, basically, to the shoulder blade. So it pulls the shoulder blade toward the ribs. Or, when it's in the appropriate alignment, it helps us lift the rib cage up for breathing. And we'll stay for about 2 more minutes, just breathing and letting go. If your mind is really busy today, mine's a little busy, then try to let yourself focus on the breath. And if you get distracted, just come back to your breath when you remind yourself. We're going to take about 2 more deep breaths. So we're going to let the legs kind of travel back toward each other, and then I'm going to let myself roll to the side and slide this pillow out from under me. And then come on back onto the back. And just see where you sort of landed. Now, I like to just pause for a second and feel. Almost always, with no matter what I've had under my back, there's a kind of a sense of like lifting and brightening around the chest, a kind of sense of opening or spreading out on the upper back. And then it feels a little bit like my arm bone is kind of dropped backwards. It really hasn't dropped backwards, it's just that it often is forward, so it feels a little backward. But it's a little bit more aligned properly for my posture. So it feels really nice. And I like to take a moment and luxuriate in that. You can do some little windshield wipery things with your legs if that seems like a good idea. Make sure that I'm in your screen. I think I am. So we're going to put the legs in this constructive rest position. So the feet are resting on the floor, the knees are in the air, and it feels reasonably comfortable. And that kind of like the bones of the thighs are kind of dropping into the hip socket in a nice way. So some people need their feet a little farther away, some people need them a little closer in, some a little wider, some a little closer together. So you just want to find the spot where it feels like you don't have to use a lot of muscle to hold your legs up. They just kind of hold themselves up. And then we're going to make sure that we can reach over our heads without running into any furniture. So we're going to stretch through the arms. So the pinkies are sort of down toward the floor and the thumbs are pointing up. Reach really deep and long through your arms, and then keep reaching as you bring your arms all the way up and over your head. Keep stretching, keep stretching, keep stretching. When you feel your thumbs touch the ground, you can pause there, just reach through the arms, and then keep reaching as you come all the way back. The whole way I'm trying to get my arms to go further away from me. So we're going to do that twice more. Stretch up. Reach nice and long. Stretch up. Reach nice and long. One more time. Stretch through the arms. Try to keep stretching. It's going to go a little differently, a little differently. Keep reaching however far you could go. And then coming on back. Keep stretching. Now when you get all the way to the bottom, you can let go of that sort of stretching sensation. And then just see where that landed your shoulders. Ooh, felt like a lot of work, which is kind of cool. All right. So we're going to take our arms, essentially just chest height, and then you're going to bend at the elbow and grab hold of your elbows. Now when I did that, my left arm wound up closer to my face. So I'm just going to use the left arm as the one I'm going to hold on to in a minute. So press the elbows away from you, bring them as close as you can to your chest or your rib cage, and then stretching through the elbows, come as far overhead as you can go, and then coming as far back as you can, right to the chest. Holding onto the forearms or the elbows, reach up, and come back. One more time, reach up, and come back. Now we're going to grab hold of this upper left arm, or whatever arm was in front for you. You're going to pull that arm across your body, and then you're essentially going to let your shoulder get really heavy, like it's made out of wet sand. So the arm is going away from that side, but you're trying to let that shoulder blade get heavy enough to touch back down to the floor. So there's nothing's going to really move. There's like a little isometric work here, stretch here. So we're trying to let the body kind of gently work with this resistance. 2 more big breaths. Some people might like the arm a little lower. This is just the place where I can get mine. So then we're going to let that settle back down. We're going to give that arm a little shimmy. We're going to shake it until the bones rattle in the hands and the wrist and the fingers get flippy floppy. About 3 more breaths. I like to do different kind of shake patterns, a little deeper, a little smaller. All right, so then you're just going to let that arm kind of melt down into the floor for a moment and just feel both of your arms in comparison to one another. See if there's a difference. I don't know, I like the one I just had shaking. So we're going to once again kind of grab our elbows, and then you just want to make sure the other arm is in front. Okay, so now my right arm's in front. I'm holding onto my elbows. I'm going to bring my arms as close to my chest as I can get them. Stretch away from me as I reach the elbows up and over. And then come back. Even though the last exercise we did before this one, the straight armed lift, is just a little different. Can you feel how we just hit things a little differently with the holding of the elbows or not? Stretch up and over. And then come on back, and again, you're just going to find a comfortable position for your arm to stay in so that you can pull that arm across and then let that shoulder blade get really heavy. And again, I'm working against the resistance to get my shoulder blade to the floor. It's not really going to touch. Keep breathing. Okay, take one more breath. We're going to let that shoulder go, and then we're going to give that arm a shake. And again, we're going to kind of hang out here for a little bit, about 30 seconds or so. Do some that are a little bigger shakes, and some that kind of get the bones rattling. One more big breath. And then just kind of let your arm fall. And again, notice how it feels. Ooh, so we're going to spread the fingers out really big and then curl them in really tight. And spread them out really big. Curl them in really tight. Spread them out really big. Curl them in really tight, and then we're just going to let them spread out a little. You're going to let your elbows rest on the floor, but let your palms face the ceiling, and then just relax through the hand a little. So this is called the mudra of cosmic receiving, which I delight in that name, but in any case, the notion is that we're sort of opening ourselves to receiving some wisdom from the ethers. Just see what it feels like to hang out with that shape, because it doesn't really matter if it does what it says it's going to do. It just matters what you feel when you're doing it. So 2 more breaths here. Then we're going to let the arms just relax beside us. Now, we can come back to the legs if you like. Do little windshield wipers. And then find your legs back in that constructive rest. Now, if your leg will do this, you're going to glide your leg out all the way straight, stretch across the front of the hip, and then you're going to glide your leg back. I have to jump over the edge of my mat. Now, some people are going to find their mat or the floor is very sticky, so you can lift your leg a little bit so that it's not as heavy on the floor, but rather than pick it all the way up, see if you can just go to the point where you just barely touch the floor. So there's a little bit of muscle activity, but not a lot of muscle activity. The higher we lift the leg, the more weight bearing it has to do, the less likely we are to really get this full benefit. So lifting the toes and maybe hovering just a little bit. We're going to extend out one leg. I'm using my right leg first. Let the toes stay pointing up if you can, and really feel this area right in the front of the hip. Lengthen out. And then you might have to do that little bit of a hover up over your mat to come back to neutral. Let's do it twice more. So sending the heel out, really stretching. Feel yourself lengthen that whole sideways. Maybe even hold it steady. Come on back. Lift the toes and glide the leg out. Feel that length develop. And then glide back. So we're going to let the right leg soften and rest for a moment. And sometimes for me it feels like the hip has dropped a little deeper when I do this. And we'll do the left side. So lifting the toes and gliding to the degree possible. Slide your leg all the way out. Give it a good stretch through the front of the hip. Flex the foot, keep the toes pointing up, and then gently draw it back into neutral. Then we're going to let the toes come up. We're going to glide the leg out. Stretch all the way through the whole side. And then glide it back in place. And let it rest for a moment. We're going to do it one more time. So we're going to glide that leg out. Give it a good long stretch. Feel that release through the whole hip flexor. You might be able to feel it all the way up to the middle of your back. And then draw that leg back into place. All right, and then just pause for a moment, let everything relax and rest, and see if maybe the left side feels like it's dropped a little bit as well. It may or may not. So we're going to do a little warm up for our abdominals. We're going to bring the hands behind the head and pressing the head into the hands so your neck is nice and secure. If you feel like you bully yourself a little too much with two hands, leave one hand on the floor and just use one hand behind your head. So we're going to press the head back, and then we're going to curl using the abdominals just a little bit off the floor. So we just want to fire up this front and upper section of the abdominals. So exhaling as you roll up, and then inhaling and pressing back. Keep your head nice and firm into your hands. Curl up and come back down. Good, we're going to do 3 more. All right, we're going to take the left ankle, put it on top of the right thigh. We're going to take our right elbow towards that left knee. Open it back out, come across. Open it back out. Just try to feel these muscles firing up to power us through that one more time. We're going to take that leg down, bring the opposite leg up. We're going to come across left elbow towards the right knee. We're going to try to really feel the obliques as they fire to pull us up one more time. All right, then let that all go. Now, you're going to hang on to your right leg. Your left leg is going to stretch out. If you like, you can take a blanket and put it underneath that leg. Now, I'm going to run into my furniture, so I'm going to turn on the diagonal here so I've got a little more room, and hopefully it will still make sense visually. So, I'm going to take the right leg first, and this is where the strap comes in handy. You don't have to use it. You can hold onto your leg, but I like the strap a lot. So we're going to hug the right leg in, give it a little squeeze if you can, and then spin your foot in circles. And then go the opposite direction. And then point and flex your foot. Alright, so we're going to take the strap and put it on our foot. Now, I like mine up by the ball of the foot. Some people prefer it right in the center of the arch, and some people like it to be a little closer to the heel. Now, with the back of the thigh, the hamstrings, I want to feel the stretch right in the middle. I don't want to feel like I'm tearing at my butt bone. So if it feels like all of this force is located right there at that sit bone, you're going to take a little bit more space. You can either bend the knee or you can take the leg a little farther away from you. Now you can pivot the leg a little bit. You can press up through the heel and pull the toes down to give yourself different kind of layers of stretch to this pose. So we're just going to pause for a bit. for about 30 more seconds here. So now we're going to take the leg out to the side. Now this is where the block can come in handy, or you could use a pillow, but it's nice to have a little bit of support for your leg so that it doesn't have to go further than it should. We want to just feel the stretch right in the center of the inner thigh. Again, if I feel like it's pulling right at my groin or right at my knee, edges are tricky. That's where the connective tissue is thicker, there's a tendon there. We don't really want to pull too hard on the tendons. We want to try to reach this kind of center part of the muscle so that we're pulling on the muscle and the fascia more than we're pulling on the spots that turn into tendons. So again, you can bend your knee, rotate a little bit, add support underneath you to help you stay put. See if you can keep your hip and your waist nice and heavy on the floor on the opposite side. We'll stay for a bit. We're going to take a nice big breath, and then we're going to take our leg back across our body into a twist. So we're going to let the hip come all the way up and over. You can bend your knee if you like and do the twist that way. I'm going to try to get my upper back to stay mostly stable. So if I pull on the strap a little bit and push into it, I get a little bit more sensation here. If that's too spicy, then you can bend the knee and take that all the way out. By spicy, I just mean really intense. Gonna stay for about another 30 seconds or so. Nice big breath. And then we're just going to let ourselves come all the way back. You can release yourself from the strap for now. You can give yourself some little windshield wipery moves. I like to be really gentle here at first. And then as it gets a little more comfortable, then I might widen the feet out and do a bigger shape. Alright, now my right leg is going to be the leg that rests, and then my left leg is going to be the leg that I'm working with. So, let that right leg just hang out, and then my left leg I'm gonna bring in, hug it in a little if I can, and then I can. You might not be able to, that's cool too. And then just round with the ankle. So take your foot in a circle. I'm gonna go the other direction with the circle. And then point and flex. Notice any tension or tightness. See if you can just breathe into it. Play with the strap. If there's a little bit of tightness like in the calves, you can direct more of the pressure there. Alright, so then we're going to take the foot into the strap. Again, you kind of find the spot you like it to live. Decide how long your strap is going to be so that you can hold onto your leg appropriately. And then we'll just pause for a bit and stretch the side out. Just letting the right leg stay heavy. I'm working a little bit through my calves by pushing my heel up. And there's I like a little pivot here and there, kind of get to different areas. And you just breathe and hang out with your stretch. And if you can, kind of pay attention to the little nuances that you're messing around with. Sometimes the nuance is just the inhale is a little different than the exhale. We're going to take about 30 more seconds here. Nice big breath. And then we're going to take the leg out to the side. So again, you might need a little extra support there. Again, you just want to make sure that whatever support that you're using for yourself, that it's providing enough support that you feel a little something, but not too much. Sometimes I have to make little adjustments first, and then I'll find the just right spot. We're going to take 2 more breaths. All right, so then we're going to come across for our twist. And again, if you like, you can sort of lose the strap and just twist. I sort of like to work with it some days, and some days I like to skip out on it. But I'm liking this little extra bit of love for that outer hip. So I'm going with it for today. big breath. And then we're going to come back to the center. Release the leg. Oh. Give it a little moment to chill. Do a little tiny movement. And then what I like to do to finish this is kind of let the legs just relax out straight and see if there's a difference in the way my body experiences just stretching out. Quite often when I first get started, my hip flexors are tight enough that my low back kind of arches a little bit off the floor, so it's nice to see if everything's a little smoother and is relaxing a little bit more on the ground. And so I like to check and see if that's true. It may not always be true. Now we're going to bring ourselves to a seated position, but take your time. So I'm going to roll to my side for a bit, just so the blood pressure has a chance to shift a notch. So when we lay down on our back, sometimes our blood pressure will drop, just to, because it doesn't have to work as hard to get blood to our head. Our big old brain isn't working against gravity. Okay. Now once you are sitting, we're going to take a moment and do whatever the best sitting position is for you. For me, just a cross-legged position works. But I am going to take my blanket, fold it up, and sit on the blanket. It's more comfortable to sit sometimes with a little elevation in your hips. And when you sit on a blanket, for this purpose, you want to sit pretty much on the edge, so that your sit bones are on the edge of a blanket. This will kind of direct your knees a little bit down, and usually it'll make it easier for you to hold your spine in a neutral, erect position. So we're going to let the shoulders relax. We did some work for those guys, but we're going to do a little bit of work for our neck. So we're just going to let the chin fall for a second and see if that kind of pulls you forward. If it does, what happens if you just bring yourself back to sitting up? And we're going to try to see and notice at the back of the neck, the muscle that connects the shoulder blade to the skull, if there's any tension there. And you might like kind of check and see, is there tension on the left or is there tension on the right? So to do that, I just like lean my head a little bit to the left and then lean it a little to the right, and I can see, like, is there tension on the back of the neck there? So for me, probably because of the way I slept last night, there's a little bit more tension on my left side today than on the right, which is not normally the case. So then let your head float back up, and we're going to take the head just a little diagonally from this side and this side and see if there's a little more tension on one side or the other. So I'm experiencing more tension on my left side than I am on my right side. So I'm going to start with my left side. And for you, you can start with either side, or you might, like me, start with the one that's a little tighter in the hopes that it will make a dramatic difference in the way this whole thing feels. So I'm going to start with this muscle in the front. So I'm going to try to stretch this little, there's a little knob right here where the jaw kind of, right near the jaw, right behind the ear. And so I'm going to take that little knob away from my collarbone. So I'm going to take my left kind of ear up and to the right, and then I'm going to pull my left collarbone down and kind of behind me a little bit. So I'm feeling a stretch along this muscle that connects my collarbone to my skull in the front. It has a great name, sternocleidomastoid, which I think sounds a little bit like a dinosaur. Sensation of stuff opening up on that side. Now I'm going to stay with the left side, but I'm going to work this other muscle. So I'm going to take my forehead diagonally to the right, and then I'm going to take a muscle that connects this ridgy part on the back of my skull. So it's not the same point, it comes around the back to the top of my shoulder blade. So if I take that little ridgy point a little bit to the right, and then I pull my shoulder blade down and to the left, then I'm going to feel that little bit of stretch. It may not be a big sensation, so don't worry about it if it's not. Just take those 2 points away from each other, and we'll rest assured that something is happening. If you have to err on the side of doing more, do more with your shoulder blade. See if you get that guy to move. Shoulder blades can be stubborn. So it's worth the try. 2 more breaths. Now we're going to come out of this really gently. So the first thing we're going to do is just kind of pick the shoulder up to take away some of the pressure. Then we're going to let the head sort of float to the center. And without a lot of movement, I'm just going to move my shoulder blades a little bit back and forth. And then I'm going to jiggle my head a little. And then just try to find what you think is a good posture so your chin is level, and see if there's a difference between your left and right side. So it feels to me like my left shoulder is a little bit lower than my right. So that's pretty good. That's at least some feedback that I was in the right territory. So I'm going to stretch this front muscle on the right side. So I'm taking my head a little diagonally to the left, stretching this point behind the jaw away from my collarbone by bringing my collarbone down away from there and slightly towards the back. Okay, 2 more breaths. So I'm going to bring the shoulder back a little bit. I'm going to turn my head, so now I'm going to take that ridge on the back of the skull away from my shoulder blade. So I'm going to take my right shoulder blade down and even bring it around toward the front a little bit. Shoulder blade, again, sometimes can be tricky to move, but do what you can, and then just pause at some point when you can't feel any more movement possible, and breathe. I find neck muscles are pretty responsive. They don't take long to start to loosen them or warm them up. One more breath. Alright, so I'm going to bring my shoulder blade up, and then I'm going to let my head gently float back up to the center. I'm going to start with some shoulder blade movement. And then when that feels kind of okay and my head's had a chance to recover, I can do a little bit of neck movement. Okay. Just kind of worked with these muscles that help hold the skull onto the spine in the right way. And usually for me when I'm done, my collarbones feel a little broader. That just feels like my neck is a little longer. And that's a pretty good place to land. So we're going to do a couple of little movements while we're here, and then we'll do some shavasana. So I'm going to take the blanket out from underneath my hips, and I'm going to put it underneath my knees. But you could leave yours under your hips. So we're going to start with a little bit of a V, not as big as you can possibly make. Be a little bit conservative, but a little bit of a V. So the feet are farther apart than the hips. So they can be, just a little bit farther apart so that it doesn't push you backwards. You can do a bigger bend in the knee to help with that if necessary. Put a little pillow under each knee instead. So we're going to start by just twisting. I'm going to start twisting to my left. So I'm just going to turn to the left. And what often happens when I do this is my right sit bone lifts off the ground to try to get me over there a little bit more. So I'm going to make sure my right sit bone goes back heavy on the floor and just twist the torso. I'm going to make sure that I'm sitting up nice and tall. Now I'm going to move my head, so I'm going to inhale and turn my head to my right shoulder, and then exhale and turn my head over my left shoulder again. And I'm not going too far in either direction, just whatever feels like the natural stopping point. And I leave my eyes closed, but you can keep yours open if for any reason that causes trouble. So I'm going to do 2 more breaths. Now I'm going to leave my head a little bit to the left, and I'm gonna side bend my right side over my right leg. Now you could bend your left leg if you wanted to here, but I'm gonna just leave mine straight. So my head is still turning a little to the left. Now you could take it a little differently if you like. Be conservative with this lower part of your back. You can be a little bit more curious about what happens if you bring the shoulder forward or back. Just be kind to your low back. There's muscles down there that don't live to be overstretched. One more big breath. Now I'm going to take my arm down. I'm leaving myself in this side bend, but I'm going to take the arm and kind of tuck it in behind me. Some people will have an arm long enough that they can actually bring it around and grab their thigh. I don't. So mine just goes behind me. And then I'm going to let my head turn the other way, and just again, I'm going to give this kind of side of my neck a little bit of a stretch, tractioning my collarbone out and just letting my head kind of hang over. So we're getting kind of into the same territory, just a slightly different angle with gravity. Be kind. Gravity can be a fierce mistress. As I'm learning over time. So we're going to take one more breath. Now the first thing I'm going to do with my exhale is just release my arm, and then I'm going to use my hand to help my head kind of come back. So I don't put too much pressure in any one spot. Now we've been turned sideways for a while, so we're not going anywhere yet. Just give yourself a little shimmy. There might be like some little seated cat-cows that feel good. Just go slow. Don't do anything that feels crummy. There's going to be a moment where you'll feel your spine kind of come back around to neutral, whatever neutral is for you. So for me, there's a moment where just everything feels like it relaxes a little bit more, and I no longer feel like I'm twisting or side bending to that first side. Because we were there a while, this might take a couple extra breaths. So I'm just about there. I'm going to slowly start the twisting process. It's possible that I will twist a little deeper in a moment. So again, there's that tendency for my left hip to want to help me. So I'm going to try to just get taller, let that left hip stay a little heavy, and see if I can twist around a bit to my right. I'm going to inhale my head towards my left shoulder, and exhale my head towards the right. You can do that or not, depending on how it feels. One more time. So again, I'm going to leave my head towards the right, and I'm going to side bend out over my left leg. So my head is kind of turned, so I'm looking upward towards that top corner. For now. We're going to change it up in a second. About 3 more breaths here. Now I'm going to wrap my arm behind my back, and again, it doesn't have to go that far. I'm going to turn my head the other direction, and I'm just going to let a little bit of gravity work the magic there. Drawing my collarbone towards my back, and just letting my head turn this way with gravity. Take one more breath. Now we're going to take the pressure away first. So I'm going to take my arm out of there. I'm going to put my hand just behind my head or just under my head. So so that as I come up, I just have a little extra support. Sometimes these muscles get really tender. They're so thin, and they're connected so deeply to the places where our nervous system lives. Oh, I like to be careful, a little bit kind. All right, now ideally, if it's available to you, you could end your practice today with some legs up the wall. I'm gonna do legs up the credenza because that's the best thing for me at this point. So I'm gonna put my legs up my little furniture object here. If you have a couch or a chair handy, like scooch up so that your butt kind of comes close to the edge, and then you just throw your legs up over the couch or over the chair. That's another great option. So try to do this without knocking over any plants or any other objects for that matter. So I'm gonna get my hips as close as I can to, like if I were using the wall, I would be as close as I can to the wall. Laying on the side, we're gonna roll ourselves up here. And then I'm gonna see, I might have to do like a little jiggle backwards to get just right. A little bit of support for the head can be nice sometimes. All right. I'm gonna come over this one just a little bit. I have a lot of plant friends. I'm just trying to nestle myself in amongst them without disturbing them too much. So getting upside down helps a few things. It can help with a little bit of like fluid movement. Sometimes things just get sluggish. In terms of the movement of the lymphatic system, especially if our body is having to fight off anything, the more stuff that the body is fighting, illness or allergies or any sort of inflammation, the more possibilities there are that the lymphatic system gets a little sluggish and doesn't move as easily. And so being upside down for a little period of time can help get the lymph moving towards the big ducts. The big ducts are where lymph can clean itself out the best. And so that, there's big ducts in our groin, in and around the knee, in the collarbone area, up under the armpits. Those are the ones where if we can get lymph to move to those places, it's definitely a little easier on your lymphatic system. The lymphatic system relies on us to move around a lot. And especially if you're kind of recovering from an illness, you might not feel like moving around a lot, so it might not give your lymph system the best opportunity. So little legs up the wall is a way to rest and get the activity at the same time. And I like to occasionally jiggle my toes or kind of jiggle the legs a little bit to help that move along. There's also some interesting properties that seem to kind of, being in inversions, and not necessarily this one, just this kind of an inversion, but any inversion can help lower the amount of stress hormone we have in our bloodstream. There seems to be a kind of boost to the blood pressure, like it lowers the blood pressure a little bit. So you just come out really slow, especially if you take blood pressure medication. And you might not hold it as long. We're gonna stay for a little bit longer, about 2 more minutes. I'm just going to hush and let you pay attention to your breath. to get out of this pose, we're gonna start really small. So all we're gonna do is just bend our knees. So I'm gonna almost like sit cross-legged on this credenza. And if I were at the wall, I would do something similar. You could also rest your feet against the wall and just bend your knees into your chest. And that's all we're gonna do for a few breaths. Just change the lever a little bit. Now we're gonna roll over to one side and make sure you've got enough room that you can stay there for a little while. We're gonna prop up the head, just rest on the side for a few breaths. So this is to allow the blood pressure to shift back to normal. When you first start doing a legs up position, like legs up the wall or legs up whatever piece of furniture you've got, you may experience some really unusual little things, like maybe your toes get cold or a little bit tingly or something like that. You can certainly bend your knees at any time, but sometimes those kinds of things go away as you practice it a little bit more, so you can sort of maybe hold it a little less time and then kind of build your way up and see if that works. There may always be reasons to only do it for a short period of time. So I don't feel lightheaded, so I'm gonna come up, but if you feel lightheaded, don't go anywhere. So if when you come up too soon and your blood pressure is kind of low, you can get a little kind of in your head. So just take a moment, take a nice deep breath. Experience a little sense of gratitude that we have this practice to help us through times that are tough. And just gives us a chance to have a recess from life's kind of trickier bits. So take a nice big breath. Let go with a sigh. Thank you for joining me. Namaste.